Welcome to the C.L.U.E Principle, the podcast that shares stories from global leaders on how they leverage and apply empathic curiosity when creating leadership mastery. All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is the C.L.U.E Principle, and we're on episode number 3. And what a great pleasure it is to have Paul Leahy with us today, who is the Regional Sales Director for the public sector for Workday. He is based down under in sunny Oz. And it's an absolute pleasure to have you with us today, Paul.
Paul, it's great to be here. Thanks for the invite, and delighted to be on the show.
Fantastic. And obviously the C.L.U.E principle is a very, very big focus area, and I think an important opportunity for people leaders in particular, Paul, just getting an understanding of people, working with people. Obviously, the C.L.U.E principle has sort of 4 specific areas, and we've added that other area around self-awareness from our second podcast guest, Karen Stein. So, love to get your thoughts on that when we reach there as well. But maybe for the listeners, Paul, why don't you give us a little bit of background on yourself first before we get into the C.L.U.E principle?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Paul. So, originally, I grew up in Canada. I went to university there. Met my wife after university, and she had an opportunity to come to Australia, and we thought we would come temporarily. That was 28 years ago. So 28 years later, we've had an awesome experience in Australia, and terrific work opportunities. And, we first landed in Canberra, and I spent most of my first 24 years in Canberra and working mostly with government or higher education or the not-for-profit sector. And my first real sales job was with a small Australian company called Tower Software, which ended up getting bought by HP a while later.
Wow.
But that was just a great place to work. When I started, there were 24 people in the company. When I left, there was, 140, and they were expanding all over the world. And it gave me, a really good grounding in I suppose, operating in the Australian culture, but also operating with government. And that's kind of been my forte since then, and worked for a number of multinationals. And raised a family. We've got a daughter who's now an adult, and super proud of her.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's great to understand sort of your journey, obviously from Canada to Australia, but also I can hear there the start of your work journey through smaller organizations and working your way up into those larger enterprises, and of course now at a significant enterprise in Workday, and a company I know focuses a lot on culture, but I find that some companies focus on culture. They don't necessarily practice it every day,
Yeah.
but I do know through yourself, but other people at Workday, they certainly practice what they preach.
Yeah, they sure do. And for me, it's been like a perfect fit. I've been here now close to 2 years. It'll be coming up to 2 years in January. And from a culture perspective, they really do practice what they preach. The 2 founders, when they founded the company way back in 2005, nearly 20 years ago, they really wanted to make a difference both in the enterprise software business, but also to the people that work for the company. And then, their premise is that if they take care of their employees, then their customers are going to be well taken care of, and their employees are going to be super productive as well. And that's been my experience. So yeah, amazingly talented people. And really well taken care of at the company, and the company really shows a real commitment to investing in communities that they work in. And for me, culturally, it's been a great fit. I've been able to bring my experience, and that's what they, brought me here to do. But from just a operation point of view, it's really been a really, really pleasing place to bring some of my background and experience and to an area that they were looking to grow in. And for me, it's been like the perfect love.
That's great. And I think that's a great fit too. Obviously, you and I have known each other for a number of years, and
Yeah.
when I saw your move there and understanding that work culture that they do have, I could see, I think this is an environment that, Paul's a great people leader, but this is an area that he could continue to thrive and probably learn even more.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm still learning, and I think that's I guess something that interests me and drives me as well is just the opportunity not only to contribute and have an impact, but also to learn as well. And I'm still learning. I feel like I'm still a newbie at Workday, and people really provide, I suppose, that environment for you to actually learn and thrive in as well,
Hmm.
which for me is, it's been different than a lot of other places that I've worked, and where you and I cross paths. I think that was a great place when we were there, and great opportunity, great timing in the market. So lots of similarities to those early years when we worked together.
Hmm.
But yeah, Workday's just I think they really help employees be the best, bring their best to work, accept who they are as people, and make sure that they really feel like they can contribute as well.
Right. Yeah, be the best version of themselves, right?
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
it's great to be able to have a platform to be able to do that. That's great. So let's dive in, and
Yeah.
obviously the clue principle for those of you listening for the first time. The C is the four letters. The C is for communication. The L for listening. The U for understanding, and the E for empathy. So let's start with the C, Paul. If we think about communication in relation to obviously managing people, love to draw on your experience around your thoughts around effective two-way communication and sort of what that means.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I've been thinking about, I guess, my experience with this, and I think the first thing for your team and your people is I suppose understand them. Make an effort to understand who they are, what their purpose is, and I think either inheriting a team or hiring a team, you have to have some sort of level of common understanding around what brings them to your organization and what brings them to the team, and then what drives them and gives them a little bit of purpose as well. And I think the real challenge in hiring and keeping teams is making sure that that purpose fits with the purpose of the organization as well, right? If those two things aren't in sync, and that's where the communication comes in, and that comes in really early. So, in hiring people, I try and make sure that there's a common understanding of what is driving me and my team kind of framework, and how that fits into the bigger organization, and then trying to understand what drives them and whether they'd be a good fit for that overall bigger purpose at the organization. um, and then being empathetic around, and I know we're going to talk about empathy soon, but being empathetic around their situation, and that's getting to know them a little bit as well. And you don't have to be their best friend, and but you do have to have this common understanding about what drives them, why that drives them, what's their purpose, what motivates them in the workplace, what motivates them in life as well, and that all starts with communication. I think the second thing, it sort of brought me back to, you mentioned where I started out. Yeah, that small company. One of the good things I think the leaders there did was have very little structure in the company. And it's interesting at a large company like Workday, they try and not have such a hierarchy in terms of that communication. And in that small company, they were really good at just doing simple things like showing up, talking to everyone, no matter what their role was. And those leaders showed that, hey, what everyone was doing was important, and they could, people could feel that just by how they showed up to work and how they were willing to talk to everyone in the business. And even when they were growing and they were in multiple locations, that was a real effort of the company to do that. And they did that in a way which was, really not. There was no, structure to it, but it was super important into the everyday kind of operation of the business. So everyone knew that they could go talk to the managing director or the head of research and development. And even as the company grew, they could do that. And the same applies here at Workday. It hasn't been the same at every company that I've worked at, but we can, if we need the CEO to help us out or our president to help us out, they do it. And so I think from a communication point of view, it's how you show up firstly, how you establish, I guess, that common playing field about what we're all here to do. And if everyone's on the same page, that provides a really good starting point. The thing I think I've had to work at is actually being more explicit in my communication as well. And I often make assumptions that things might be clear, and I think you've got to make a real effort around that. That's been, a big learning for me. Is I think I've been good on the first piece about establishing common understanding with people about what brings them to work and what drives them in their life, but having to work at that harder piece around, well, being explicit about performance goals, being explicit about just day-to-day things and not taking those for granted. So that's I think the harder work of that two-way communication. And the big thing about communication is being open and being available as well. And I've worked in a lot of places where I don't, you really don't feel that sometimes that you're being heard or listened to. And I suppose I make an effort to make sure that I can do that. I don't know if I'm always successful in doing that, and everyone has time constraints, and maybe you're not always bringing your best self to work. And I think you really have to make a real effort to be available. And I think that's as a leader, that's a real key thing, and being empathetic to people's need around wanting to communicate and in a format that they're comfortable with. Some people they're cool if you shoot them a text, and they don't, but other people really they want to get on the phone, they want to have a chat.
The face-to-face time, right?
Yeah.
It's that level of genuine intent, which is what I'm hearing you talk about. The small company you talked about, obviously where you are today with Workday, but the genuine intent is the foundational element that I find is really required. If you don't have that, then you really don't have the platform to even start.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, that's the way I see, my way of operation, and I think it's been successful. Sometimes it's hard not to be personal when you do that, and sometimes it's hard to be clinical around performance and things like that. But for me, it's been really important about how to bring that human piece to work and connect with people on a human level. And when I've had people either in my team or people who I reported to that didn't operate in that way, I didn't really feel comfortable ever in that environment, and I don't know if I performed as well as a result. And for me, it just put me under more pressure, I felt. And I don't know if that was intentional or not, but that's I think just for me operating like that, I think it's been successful for the teams that I've worked with. And it's also just part of what I want to do.
Yeah, exactly. exactly. So that's great, and really great insights on communication, both from your and also from a company perspective. So let's move on to the L, which is listening. And I guess the L and the U are somewhat connected because it's about listening to understand. So feel free to sort of combine those two if you like. But what are your thoughts about, the practice of listening? We just talked about genuine intent, which obviously helps with that.
Yeah.
But love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, that's the other side of the coin, isn't it? Really, and I mean, a key piece of communication is if you're a good listener, if you are available, and if you are showing the right signals to your team about being willing to be there and to share a challenge or a problem and help them solve that. I think in many cases, often you'll find that people will bring a challenge to their boss, and their boss won't necessarily help them in solving it. Now, we can't always solve everything, and part of being a good coach as well is helping people to solve things on an ongoing basis as well. But there's just being able to have that open door, being available, being seen, whether that's physically or online, you can do both, and ensuring that you're responsive kind of shows people that they've got an open ear, and that if there is a challenge, there's someone there that can help them with that. And it's hard when you're busy to always listen. It's also, we're in a busy kind of world. You're sort of trained to quickly try and solve the problem. Sometimes people just want to talk about the problem, not necessarily for you to try to solve it as well. So picking how to do
Mm.
that, I think one of the challenges I've had is quickly wanting to solve the problem for people, and not necessarily, maybe they can solve it. Maybe that's a better growth experience for them. But I think the first thing is you got to be able to show up and be able to be there, and be available. And if you're consistently not, I think you'll find that performance will suffer. Performance in the team suffers.
Mm.
Not having that open door will have a real impact on performance. So it all comes back to, I guess, that again, what are we all here to do, and how can we get about doing that? And if you've got a challenge, then that's something that I should lean into, and whether that's leaning
Mm.
in to coach someone to solve it, or leaning in to figure out how we can collectively solve it.
Yeah, and it sort of links that there's a couple of things that you've highlighted a few times here. Um, we talk about empathic curiosity, which is the ability to put yourself in the shoes of other people, which I'm hearing you talk about there. And I think the common couple of themes that have come through in some of your commentary is also around time. Enough time to manage, or time management as well. And it's that consciousness of saying, am I giving enough time to the people that I need to give time to, and what is the type of time that I need to offer? To your point, am I coaching someone, or am I just literally listening and being a sounding board because that's what this particular individual requires versus somebody else? I think that's an interesting factor, is that ability of getting time, and then when you've got it, literally pouring yourself in to say, all right, let me put myself in the shoes of the other person to work out how are we going to communicate, how are we going to engage.
Yeah. I think you raised a really good point, Paul, about different individuals want different things from that relationship, and want, some of them want your detailed analysis on something. Some people just want you to listen to them. They don't want you to solve the problem. They've just called you to tell you something. So it's picking, each individual and then each circumstance, trying to navigate those in the right way. And that takes effort. That takes, as
Mm-hmm.
you said, it takes time. And I think that's the most challenging thing, is making sure that you can have that time to do that properly. And that's for me is still a challenge every day, is how to divide up that time to ensure that the team has what they need, that they have an open line of communication somehow with me, and it's in a way or a format that they prefer as well. So that I think is always difficult, and I think that's probably where I expend the most effort, is how am I going to be available to listen in
Mm.
in my day, and how do I chunk that up when a lot of the day is kind of structured with some stuff that
Right.
is important too, but maybe not necessarily directly important to my team.
I think the element too, then, I mean, if we think about obviously communicating, we're listening. I want to touch on the element of understanding. So we've talked about the importances of the first two, but even more so, it's about not listening for the sake of it, but actually listening to understand people in order to, and you said it at the very start, to be seen as someone that can be approached, that is supportive, that can be trusted, because trust is a
Yeah,
huge component of people management. But people even staying inside an organization and reducing attrition and all of those things
yeah.
are factors of all of these things, right?
Yeah, you touched on a really nice point about trust. I wanted to mention that at the beginning. I think in communication, I think that common understanding and understanding who someone is builds that trust. And if they feel that, then they're more open to communicate with you openly. Whether that's maybe bad news as well. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
in work there's bad news as well, and
Right.
often people have to feel open about bring that news, but you bringing a mindset to that of, okay, well, what can we do about it, rather than figuring out, is there someone to blame. I think you want to be open so that you can basically figure out what you can do, and that's what work's about. It's like, how do we break that down, and what is it that we're going to do about it?
Yeah. The importance there, I think, of the ability for people to be comfortable. You talk about there's a need for the other side to be somewhat vulnerable, but sometimes if that's difficult for them and they don't see that there's an opening right here, uh, then they'll go a different direction. They
Yeah.
won't engage you. So, to your point, two-way is required.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
All right, so let's look at empathy, and obviously, as a result of communicating, listening to understand, it goes a long way to be able to build trust, as we talked about, and ultimately gain empathy on both sides of the fence. Give us your thoughts around and any examples that you can share of that sort of coming together and working for you and the people around you.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I've had, really good examples of good leaders that I've worked for who've shown that empathy, that understanding of, your situation, and that understanding of what else is going on in your life, and how that either positively or negatively affects what you do at work as well, and people being empathetic to that. So I think I've had lots of good examples, both in my life, but also in my work experience as well, where people have shown the right empathy. And I think, maybe maybe early on in my career, I was a little bit more competitive as an individual contributor, and maybe, I think I've learned from those people that have been good leaders to me, about how to be a leader, and which is, it's really about the team. It's about them. It's not about me. It is about our common purpose and what we're here to do. But really, as a leader, it's really about what can we do to make them successful? What can we do to understand them better so that they can perform better in the environment that they're in? and trying to do that again. That I mean, I'll come back to the time thing. Having the space or making yourself appear vulnerable as well too is good for the team to see. I think just to show that I'm a human being as well, and that means that if they're comfortable, they can be who they are. That they can show vulnerability as well, and that's I think it's a good thing in terms of everyone's awareness about themselves too, and just being a little bit vulnerable. You open yourself up to new possibilities and learning new things, and learning new approaches. If you think you know everything, if you're sure about everything, then you're less likely to be open to new
Mm,
approaches.
mm,
So I suppose there's a bit about showing that empathy so that I can open up the best that's in the team in
mm.
many ways.
That's a great point. And I think you hit the nail on the head. It is about your willingness to be vulnerable, and I think then in time, it's not necessarily an immediate reaction to a conversation with a one-on-one or even in a team environment, but it is an element of opportunity that I think people start to feel, even in their subconscious, to sort of say, "Oh, that was
Yeah,
sort of interesting. Maybe I could share." And I think then, as people leaders, our ability to then provide the platform for them to share. It's one thing to say, "I think I can share." It's another thing to be given an opportunity to share. Like that.
yeah.
That's critical, right?
It is really critical, and I think we underestimate that. And even in my own experience, like I still feel new in many ways, given there's lots of people with lots of
Mm,
experience at Workday. So sometimes, I don't often, I might not share as much as I can, but I too feel like you have to feel comfortable in a space where
mm,
you can be given that opportunity to share and contribute, and I think people will always surprise you. I think we make judgments about people in a particular role or particular function sometimes about what the possibilities for those people are, and it's not until you give them the opportunity that you see that they can actually thrive or perform in a
mm,
a new experience or a new role. And so I try not to um, assume things about other people. We're all human, so
mm,
we jump to those conclusions. But I think it's really important to see what the potential could be for people in other roles, and bringing new challenges to them, and I suppose providing them that platform to do that. It's really about providing them with that comfort and ability to do that. I know that works for me, and some people are really good at going out there and grabbing a challenge, and other people really need to be shown, hey, we think you can do this, or we think that you've got this. We don't have any concerns about you doing it, and you see people thrive then, and they pick that up, and
mm.
you've given them that trust to go ahead and do something new.
Yeah, I think leading into, I'd love to talk to you about your thoughts about self-awareness, but leading into that, I've seen um, examples of managers where I guess they've started to open up as being self-aware, but only often by being put in a situation where they're somewhat forced. We talked about time. This is a time and a space where they're actually listening to each individual team member, which
Yeah,
I've coached and taught people on. However, it was only that time when they became aware that I didn't realize, Paul, that you were somewhat introverted and you felt uncomfortable about saying something inside a meeting.
yeah.
Have you seen that, and is that something that you're conscious of?
Yeah, I'm really conscious, even in my own experience as well. So I have to be comfortable in a space and know that people trust me to speak or to bring what I know about a particular topic. So for me, that's I've become more aware of that and more aware of not making assumptions about people I'm getting on to your point about self-awareness. I think yeah, I mean, that is a journey, right? I think, maybe this is a bit of a stereotype as a younger man, maybe you're not as self-aware and you think you're pretty
Hmm.
good at everything, right? But
Yeah,
as you get
yeah.
older, you kind of become aware that maybe you're not so good at some stuff. And you've got some weaknesses, right? Which you haven't always recognized. And I suppose, that's just a continual thing that for me is a bit of growth. Yeah, not
Mm,
go back to the example I gave at the beginning about communication. I've become, more aware that I have to be more explicit
yes.
and more clear about certain things and not make assumptions about people's understanding about things. That's just one area. And then I suppose, yeah, I can appear in a particular way, and I think I've got to be, well aware of of what impact you can have on other people by showing up in a particular way or showing up not, not appearing open or
Mm,
appearing calm when maybe you're not calm as well. It's okay to show that you're not calm all the time.
right.
So yeah, there's that's a real work in progress. I think it's just a life skill, and a lot of what we're talking about today are life skills that you know you continually have to work on. And when you become aware that at least you're working on them, I think that's first step in the right direction. And that
Yeah.
goes for leaders, it goes for team members, and for me, just a personal insight, like on, there's management and there's leadership, and I think everyone shows up and brings leadership to either what they do or regardless of their role in the workplace.
Mm,
And I try and encourage people to take that leadership themselves, and that means not just necessarily maybe doing the the, the fundamentals of the role, but bringing a little more of themselves to the organization as well.
I think that's an important point. The the areas of, I think, also self awareness that I picked up on. It goes back to your point around being younger and maybe not being so self aware. I think I realised that I actually wasn't great at things that I thought I was pretty great at, and I also, as part of that, I've seen an ability to also be realistic and truthful with myself to say, you know what, I'm actually not, I don't feel like I'm having the impact here. I need to now bring somebody else in or refer them to someone else or suggest a mentor, in order to sort of help build people. So it also becomes
Yeah.
not everything is about us, to your point. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I think you touched on a couple things. Not being necessarily good at and recognizing what you're really good at, and I think I've had the opportunity to be in the right place at the right time to kind of take advantage of work opportunity in a way that was in a growth phase, and for me that
Mm-hmm.
was exciting, and it kind of fit my style. The things that I'm probably continue to need to work on in a work situation are more the operational day to day kind of things, but the longer term strategy about how to get from here to where we want to be in terms of being successful, bringing the team together on that journey. Those are things that I enjoy doing. I like doing,
Mm-hmm.
and bringing people together and having a common purpose to that. That that kind of drives me. The
Mm-hmm.
the nuance of the day to day stuff. that is hard work, right? That's just plain hard work. And some people are very, very good at that operational detail and do that way better than I do.
Right.
And that's a recognition about, getting the right complement, both in your team, but with the
Mm.
extended team that you work with, and being confident that you can rely on other people to help pick up where your weaknesses are. So, yeah, I'm very, very conscious of that, and not being able to, I think sometimes I do try to do too many things,
Hmm.
and kind of focusing back to, well, where am I going to have the greatest impact for the
Right.
team and for the benefit of the company, and that's, you got to have some self-awareness around that as well. And
Yes.
when you're, yeah, I don't when I look back on my career, I see that I wasn't always thinking that way. There's a little bit of
Mm.
clarity now around where the good bits are, and where I need to work hard, and where I need to maybe not focus, and get other people to compliment me.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. No, you're
Yeah.
spot on. Um, all right. So we've gone through the clue principle. We've spoken about self-awareness, which Karen Stein is going to be very, very happy with me about. I'll have to start paying her a commission. But what I wanted to do is maybe we could get some sort of final thoughts from you, Paul, on any sort of tips and tricks that people could pick up on from maybe some of the sort of biggest learnings that you've been able to capture over your career to date.
Yeah, well, I think, Paul, I've been lucky enough to have a lot of good leaders that I've worked for, and they've shown me, some great examples of how to treat people, and how, to allow people to perform well, and in a way, you talked about trust at the beginning. That was a fundamental element. Uh, so for me, I think, um, bringing that trust element to a relationship, with your team, with the individuals in the team, with the organization as well, is a fundamental thing. And then having that, I suppose, that ability to be seen as being open, that you can be open and provide, I guess, whether it be that sounding board, provide that
Mm-hmm.
avenue for communication for people when they
Mm-hmm.
need it. And, working at that, I think for me, bringing that piece together with, making sure that there's a, common understanding of what's driving someone, and
Mm.
how that can work for the organization, and how that can work for that person to feel comfortable to perform really well. And having those couple of pieces together, that trust element with understanding who people are and what they want to do, and how they fit, can really make a successful team. I think those are, a couple of takeaways for me. I think the final thing would be, always be open to be learning about how else you can, continue to be a better leader, to continue to gain better understanding, to continue to be open to self-awareness. And
Mm.
that's a hard thing, I think, is kind of admitting that maybe you've got stuff to work on, and then working on it. It's easy to push those aside, or at least being aware of good things that you do, and maybe not so good things that you're not so good at, and finding a
Right.
way to augment those with the right people in the team structure as well.
Right. Yeah, I think you've just justified the clue principle changing to the clues principle with your response to it's. You bring up a really important point, and I think it's a great point to sort of finish on. Is that understanding and ability that you've got to understand both sides, your
Yeah,
you and the other person or people and organization. There's lots of factors and the belief in you to say it's actually worthwhile taking the time to reflect. And I've done that a number of times in my life. It's actually extremely powerful. And
Yeah.
because not every day in our workday do we afford ourselves or get afforded the time. So I think that's a big takeaway for me from today's session.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, I agree, Paul. Well, it's been great to chat to you today, Paul. Really appreciate being on the show, and I'm really humbled to share a little bit about what I could offer there, and I hope that's helpful for some folks out there as well.
It will be. It will be absolutely. It's just a great opportunity for people to sort of listen into from people from all different walks of life. But obviously, our target is people that we know are in the right headspace and have probably learnt their lessons, just like I have, and be able to share those thoughts and those inputs. So, Paul Leahy, thank you so much for being on the C.L.U.E Principle. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and insights with the world. And we wish you well. And we look forward to touching base again with you soon.
Yeah, me too, Paul. Thanks so much for the opportunity, and wish you all the best. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
A big thank you to Paul Leahy for sharing his insights of leadership mastery. See you next time on the C.L.U.E Principle.